Just gonna get right into it. Just reading three things: two mini chapters from the Tao, and then two medium lengthy, well done, rare, well, and I call this style rare, well done. So this style is so when I first thought of this book, like without the explanation, I thought it was about literal, like, the human wants to anthropomorphize things. For some reason, the human brain is just fixated to, and that's not good, that's not bad. Even the early humans, right? When the humans were in the caveman stage, when there was such a caveman stage, that was an isolated off experiment. It was because there's examples of of the examples of the possibility of that could happen reflects that to make it so that there's a mathematical percentage probability where there's infinite other isolated experiments. So if there's infinite other isolated experiments, it's not necessarily in the junction or the radius or the avenue of just time per se. It's a little bit it's something totally different, particularly from time. So when I say the whole timeline series, I'm seeing different works in the present moment make it so how there's a thing that's beyond time, right? So if there's a thing that's beyond time and everything low key on a subtle energetic contract has to do with governing time, then the surface level matrix is in such a state of forgetfulness and amnesia that we don't know that we're bound to time itself. And in the underground, I speak on what time is in a whole different lens, because when I keep being a broken record and I keep saying the underground, it's because I'm referring to many different episodes, individual isolated episodes where I'm speaking of something I'll say. I have there's like a whole different thing about even time, right? So like, what is time? Time is just a length and a width and a breadth and a depth and a volume of different energies spanning out from it having a particular type of elemental expansion. And from that elemental expansion, different elemental spaces happen. So obviously there's different spaces within spaces in its own original open source stream. And within those spaces and the spaces, new consciousness comes arise and reflects the same properties as the source, the awareness principle. Like every molecule is subject to have some type of new innate biomolecular physiological conscious awareness. The awareness just to kind of like have that soul particle part of self, and that soul particle part of self, like for some miracle, because no one in science is talking about how awareness comes about, right? And what makes awareness possible, right? You know what's funny? That's like the number one thing out low key out of everything, right? It takes an awareness, a particular type of like an esoteric awareness, right? Like it takes a certain type of awareness to actually you firsthand individual govern and detect like a certain lineage of not just truth knowledge, but spirit truth and spirit knowledge. That's a different truth that we're barely coming to interface with, because what is all this new future weird shit? It's a truth unknown or forgotten or just blemished. So it's one of those three. It's unknown, forgotten, or blemished. Because what is a new experience? It's something that's unknown, you haven't partaken. It could be blemished because it's just a false program projected simulation iteration of a visualization, or it's forgotten, right? It's like for some reason, like there's a new thing that doesn't know about it because the new thing is apart from its original thing, which has a different set of memories in itself. And the memories are a different type of spiritual energetic encapsulator module that encapsulates certain type of elements. And like like they were peeping game the whole time. Like, I was talking about the whole like, the various types of encapsulation things like in the backdrop. They heard it like a while back, and I'm just saying that just for my own memo notes and shit like that. But like like we're not. It's like not necessarily new. That's what. And I'm not trying to be a broken record with that either. I'm just saying the further we, the sooner we particularly accept it's not necessarily new and no one owns it in a different like balanced nature logic. No, like it just is. It's and for me to say that is a miracle because it alleviates the detrimental toxic psychological competition where who's owning the shit when really no one owns anything because it's its own like self thing that doesn't need that. It's just being. It's beingness. The life force is with the first chapter of the whole enveloping vessel of whatever the fuck the different various types of solar systems are, and that constellation, that bandwidth of constellation traveling on its own body away from the esoteric feminine astrological solar system admin cabinet body, and that sun bandwidth is out springing out forth, and they're separating and they're re-enveloping because obviously we could have a different recall and recurrence of how the shit was put together, and then we could come back from different contexts of like the dream world where we have a unique relationship with God, and within the unique relationship with God, we don't realize that there is God that is nothing, right? There is that nothing God, right? So within that nothing God, and the Buddhists, that's their whole thing, like low key on a different simplification level. Because I've read Buddhist books like long time ago, and I respect y'all. But I'm just saying, like what you guys are ultimately pointing to, there's this strong emphasis on like identifying the non-identifiable and identifying that which is void, right? And having and kind of like saying, and you have switching out of your different references to what intelligence, awareness, and consciousness is. You ironically needing to borrow from other traditions, but still being stubborn and rigid with your tradition by you thinking that your tradition is like your ultimate truth of energy, which it is for your case and context because everything by nature is perfect. But you're saying that you're convicted that your truths are like the absolute truths of life and death and consciousness when you're still borrowing from other things to help contribute to yourself, not just on a mental level, but on an energetic and genetic level. And within those levels, you're trying to make it so that your tradition is the number one tradition, or your religion is the number one tradition. It's not necessarily particularly that, but that just being an example of like how your religion can't be the number one religion when you're literally on different case to case, trait to trait scenarios. You're borrowing from that tradition so you can enhance, amplify, and evolve and progress your tradition. So your tradition can't be the ultimate tradition because by different energetic governance, observance, and visualization and preference of a different higher magnitude caliber, it's being seen on how a different context and perspective and a different energetic vantage point of how the trade wars are going on, the quote unquote trade wars, right? And you don't even have to call it that, right? Because if you're calling it just the trade wars, then you're ultimately feeding it's just that polarity of that scenario of saying of just kind of like casually, no disrespect, you're avoiding like you're avoiding like the miracle peace insights and the miracle agreements and the miracle cooperation that can come about when the opposite side of the coin of the trade wars is the treaties, right? The different international treaty logistics. So now we're talking about and it's just a white square, huh? So simple, with a white dream, with a white soul, with the white spirit that transcends the white time. Before any notion of a creature, human being white or black. It's just spirit time. So within saying all of that, I'm going to get right into the book. So I got 3 things to read, 2 Tao chapters, 2 medium length chapters, Chaos, Gaia, and Eros book. And this book is actually, like, to my new understanding, it's referring to a philosophical framework of different energy relationships on how we have a new consciousness to make an awareness to know that there is different contexts and facets and layers of said mind. And the awareness is working with the other elements to make a yin yang dynamic to solidify and materialize something of a more densified as opposed to a less densified, something of a energetic mental wind fire encapsulation barrier to make something of a container, particularly of the mind. Chaos, and in this philosophical pursuit, whether it's Greek or not, they're referring this chaos reference of philosophy to the mind, Gaia being the body, and the spirit of evolution. And obviously, those terms could be perceived differently. They could have a different context. They could be defined differently, obviously. And the terms could also be used differently and processed differently and learned through differently. And obviously, they could have different contexts, as I said before. So within the context, it's not one context is better than another context. Things are used for a different context because they're used for a different context. It's not necessarily comparing contexts as like one context is better than another context. It's not necessarily saying that. It's saying the other contexts could have some type of different context of a validity of its energetic correctness. Because chaos, that could refer to a divine like mother creature, right? But in this reference, it's referring to the mind. So that those contexts could meet, right? So it's the meeting of contexts, right? And then the meeting of contexts is obviously 1980s literary works of computer code and like technical code, and around that area, they already have dived and delved into such matter, topic, subject of what context means, right? But where did like the 1950 computer code digital age and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, where did they draw their inspiration and knowledge from? That's what the investigation is particularly doing and digging towards. It's seeing where, like, how did we evolve? How did we get this computer code advancement? How did the robots become the robots, or how did the internet become the internet type of shit? So it's that collaborative spiritual teamwork. So it's a spiritual teamwork, We're doing our own mental shadow work where we don't have to have that toxic nature, that toxic mindset, that envious mindset, that raw too raw, polarized, out of judiciary, out of syllabus type of, a polarized like barbarianism. Like we can't in the sophistication of the times of not just the text, but just of everything else in general. We can't go out of bounds with the judiciary acts of the ancients and the prelims of, when fucking 1776, when George Washington actually got his download. Where did he get his download from? It's like maybe George Washington wasn't even his real name. Maybe that was just an alias, or however you say that word, an alias. And within that alias, it's like that could have been like just one phase of him, right? Where that could have been like a whole different being of spirit that we have no idea about, or maybe one of you, like fellow American, young American, and you don't have to be necessarily just a certain type of, leaf of octave of a skin tone, You don't have to be I guess, any of the four, right? The Negroid, the Mongolianoid, the Caucasianoid, and obviously correct the pronunciation of it, and the early Native Americans, or that being pre-spliced with some type of early ancient Arabian cultures or whatever. Yeah, and that slides kind of like smoothly into this next chapter, because this is the history of history, right? And there's maps. So I'm going to show the maps real quick. So I don't know if you can see that map, and obviously you can transcribe it however you will. So see those maps? Those are time periods. It's on my finger, huh? Sure. So obviously credit to the author of this book, Rawww, if that serves appropriately. So the chapter of this is the history of the histories, and these maps are just these graphs, these tables, they're tripping me out because it's so broad, right? It's seeing different genetic groups coming from their own context of caveman, of barbarian. And from that barbarian, the barbarian shifted and transitioned to such states of like an advanced forager, foraging in such a way where they're working with nature and they're using nature to help harness them and build houses. They're using the trees, they're cutting down the trees to get wood and build houses. Like that happened, right? So that niche thing happened. So it's a niche type of esoteric feminine history that we're talking about. What is the feminine history? The different isolated genetic human experiments are happening in such a way where we get a reserve and mine things like wood or things like steel or things like any of these chemical elements on the periodic table and more, right? Obviously in respect to a different future and respects to the transitioning ego, just the evolution of now, because obviously things could get like, kind of like overindulged with the composition and the toxic mentalities, right? And that's not necessarily true. So there's an esoteric feminine history where we're like gathering wood, right? We're making appliances, we're making machinery. Where there's a state where there's a somewhere, and it probably happened like 12 million years ago, because we're just kind of like we're not really acclimated with like we're just not acclimated with how the human has evolved for like a long time, because we're a new version of the human, right? So since we're a new version of the human, we're kind of on like an energetic need to know like basis, right? But there were times where like we started to do something, right? So if there was a time that we started to do something such as cut down trees and gather wood, then there was a time where after that, it was pre-manufacturing ages of building appliances and machinery to even mine and condense and transform and re-alchemalize in a geoterranical, like manufacturer, like collaborative mental teamwork fashion, where we're making machinery and big appliances to actually re-transform a certain type of resource, refine a resource so we can make it and turn it into a different resource, such as wood or such as, however they're using like hydrogen for like, these cars. Obviously 2017 underground science article was like, okay, now there's a hydrogen powered battery. Great, good job. Like, so I'm talking about the esoteric feminine history of like, now we're at a point where like we're at a particular stage with AI. In the 90s, AI wasn't as fucking in the public, but I'm sure in the 90s, low-key, it was just as advanced, because in the 80s movies, they're showing it that the AI humanoid robots are already a thing in the 80s. So if they're a thing in the 80s, 45 years later, give or take, 40 to 50 years later, give or take, they've been doing their homework 50 years, probably plus. Because obviously, like, if you watch Star Trek Enterprise Season 1, chronologically, the first season of the Star Trek narrative, at the end of Star Trek Enterprise, and that season came out in like the 2000s, towards the end, they're pointing towards somehow, in the last season, they're pointing towards somehow, there was just an episode in the last season. I don't want to get, I don't actually, I don't want to even give this, I don't want to give that in, because it's like, I just, but there was a thing where like they traveled in a certain time in history, and there was a certain exchange that happened, right? So I'm gonna end it right. I'm gonna leave that point right there. And within that, it's like we're barely catching up on just that vantage point of technology, pretty much, just to like kind of complete that. But I'm actually gonna read the astrology transit first, the HD transit, and if you know, you know. If you know the website, you know the website. But I'm just gonna read it from as it says it from there. Like I usually just read it. So here's the sun. Here's the sun transit message from the human, the HD point of view perspective, and it's like this it's that center beacon life force energy, where that part of the season and the constellation, Like what are first of all you gotta ask what are the I Ching gates in the constellation? Like what does that mean? Obviously, like because if you're gonna like try to study HD, it however you will, there's gonna be questions, and if there's teachers that demonize questions, there's toxic as fuck teachers out there, right? So the new intelligence of the kids and the older people in any age, we have new intelligence to recognize toxic ass teachers, right? What does that mean? Toxic ass teachers, like if you ask a question in class, and for some reason the teacher has some type of random ass attitude and funk, and he tries to challenge your inquisitiveness when you're there to learn itself, then what's the point of even like trying to be a teacher if you're gonna like downplay what we're there to fucking do is learn and try to grow and teach each other. So if you're gonna downplay that in your teacher, that's something like that's like a hypocrisy right there, right? So since that's a hypocrisy, it's like and the law can't have the intelligence to check hypocrisies and chemical law is broken, then it's like that's the outdate and the obsolete shit in the quote unquote law and the past industry itself. Because everyone has a different subjective future and past, right? Everything's now, right? But we're all bringing our own past right now to make some faction of the collective present a percentage of the past and a percentage of the future and a percentage of now based on all of our collective past, future, and now, because that's what we're pouring into in the present moment. Everybody's pouring out all of their stuff energetically on a time dynamic into the present moment for the present moment to even be what it is right now. So simultaneously, the present is like it's ever chaotic and then it's like everly like orderly, right? Because there's some type of thing that's allowing the lubrication for the things to evolve, such as the time of the human. And it's chaotic because everyone's pouring their past, future, and the present in this collective now, and they're doing that on a subjective level to the objective level, thus making the universal mechanics of life. So this is the shit that fucking DeepSeek can't comprehend on how to fucking have a balanced response and quote unquote challenge to the particular claims in the original questions that are being proposed in an organized, dynamic fashion like structure. That's why it's beyond DeepSeek. And if you can't understand that, if you can't comprehend that, that's even more ironic. And it's more intelligent because you're asking how to learn and you're trying to teach and you're coming into the fucking the space as a teacher when you're not, when there's a hypocrisy within the teaching of not trying to like, we're here to learn from each other pretty much. That's the point. We're here to learn from each other. Or we could or do the opposite of that, right? Because we're in the distorted. Well, the age of Cali, it had a significant share of distorted contributions, right? Inversions to distortions, right? And the distortion is subjected from how we're dealing with the inverted mechanics, right? Standard. And you could demonize the inversion of things or not. So this is some fucking advanced TD shit. Because the predecessors put us on game on things for us to know that something got inverted to begin with, that means something's wrong collectively, generally. And if you don't see that something's wrong collectively and generally, that's the subjective that's the subjective. I think I'm fucking like this little like weird innocent thing, and I'm gonna pretend that the world's not fucked up for just some immature intellectual reason. So chapter 3 of the history of history, or let me just read this. So I'm gonna read the sun message, and if you read the sun message, so this is what we're kind of like, we're resetting, the sun is having a new reset takeoff from its original balanced harmonic center point, because in the spring equinox, there are different bodies of energetic esoteric space where there's an equal measure of day and night for some reason. The tilting has been it's been off split to on split for a time being for something to recalibrate itself. The feminine Advent body and the masculine Advent body traveling in the feminine binary star and the masculine binary star, the advanced dream world and the advanced physical matrix. Number 1 since 2017, and y'all are majority of people deep down are just cowards. That's just what it is. So gate 21, biting through. So kind of like first house and fifth house, where like our first house and fifth house energy is it's being signified by some type of chakra, and that chakra is in such a way where it's generating a certain space of the chakra energetic principle of the chakra, the sun in this case. It's in a certain place in the constellation where the constellation has been charted out in a solar system like level dynamic. What are the I Ching gates in the constellations? The constellations have been charted out from the I Ching gate by seeing the different processions and patterns within the constellation from 0 degrees to 28 to 30 degrees plus minus 1. And within that temperament of the constellation, that was put by some type of harmonic creator order, because for some reason, for the constellations in the solar system body, the feminine abdomen cannon body solar system spaceship of some type of dragon mother and her denominations, because all of this is blue dragon mother oriented, and since it's dragon mother oriented, we don't have to give it names like succubus or any of this demoness or Lilithius or Penelopetheus or Schlemonius or Spumonius. Like, we don't have to get like, that's just the dynamic function of the feminine dark dragon mother. She has a dark, the metaphysical nature of the dragon mother is she is the womb. She is some context of the container itself. Because we're trying to break down what is the container of things, right? So within that, there's a whole spectrum of how new creations get spawned from that, and we forget that that's what's going on. And now we have our own subjective relationship to like weird future shit, right? So since this first and fifth house energy, this crown-like energy, this crown character energy that has a relationship with, you know, powering the whole being, because like the car and the human being, they need a certain engine, chakra, energy center for them to make a new body of things. For you to make a new body, human being, quote unquote car, end quote, it takes a collection of different energy centers, irrefutably. So within those different energy centers, we're seeing how those energy centers are coming to be. The heart chakra, the different mixtures of like the different differentiation ratio dynamics of how all the chakras are all like the different planets in a different mix, and the heart chakra being a mix of, you know, obviously the earth, and there's like, and obviously there's and etc. So all the chakras are earth, right? There's an earth component to all the chakras. It has some type of materialization, right? Your heart has tissue, your heart has matter, right? There's some tissue matter in the heart itself, some type of refinement of a solar system alchemicalization process where the sun and the earth are in a unique conjunction field of a different fusion environment, transition phase, pressure system, where those two energies meet, the sun and the earth, and now they're making a new matter of energy already, like, oh, you see these new articles of like, oh, this is happening now, this is happening. The solar system has been doing that. That's the difference between the critical intelligence and the critical context of difference between everyone saying this is the new discovery, yet they're still falling short on a piece of explanation that for it to not make sense somehow, for some intellectual piece still be missing, and them still be hankering, and them still having a reflective habit of the mind of unique demonic suffering, where they're still hankering. And this is advanced yoga, right? Because advanced yoga is obviously cleaning the mind, right? Not judging, first of all, letting things be as they are. So once we not judge, it's like the Bible says, judge and you shall be judged. And we don't understand how deep that saying goes. We don't understand who put it there, as they put it there, why they put it there. We're just kind of reading the Bible, fluffing it, bunny rabbit footing the Bible. Oh, fast as it says, let's run through the Bible and not understand the Bible. No, the Bible is saying that there's a hidden feminine within the Bible, and within that hidden feminine, that is something of a container, a carrier, a chariot, and some type of like receiver process to see how there's subtle wars over feminine properties and material things. There's wars in the Bible. So within that wars, it takes a different esoteric scientific process for the Bible to point out Loki, astrology, and the alchemical process of Jesus raising his kundalini, Jesus going into different phases of quote unquote dark realms, and then coming out as the Christ-like anointed being, and him rising in a different alchemical process, him exalting his fifth and first house and bringing a certain type of base energy, quote unquote serpent kundalini energy. And obviously it doesn't have to be literal like that per se, and it could be a metaphor for just a different environment itself, for a collective age to reach a certain, because if the Mother Earth has kundalini, and if the Mother Earth has a third eye, then whatever she feels, we're affected by Mother Earth, right? So if Mother Earth's kundalini is on, by essence, the things that are on Mother Earth, what do you think is going to happen to the human beings if Mother Earth gets some type of activation? We're going to feel that fucking shit. And it has nothing to do, ironically, with who has the most money, right? It's a whole different dynamic of life, of the Earth and the solar system are going into an unknown fucking vicinity, jurisdiction, injunction, of an unknown future. And now we're bringing that solar system, and now we're pretending to be innocent when we have to be doing our homework, right? We have to be doing some type of collective work, a different type of work, so you can be fucking safe. So do your job and stop complaining about stupid, petty ass shit. To justify the necessary use, I'm not going to read this. I'll read this part. So this case, yeah, the audience won't necessarily understand it, and it's kind of it's just a different this quote unquote human design knowledge, end quote. It really takes, like, the disclaimers they don't give, ironically, it takes some processing to really fucking like shift. And who's to say that your process with the shift, particularly with your subjective relationship with HD, is ever over, right? So there's within the Vedic perspective of it, what we keep failing to realize is there's a particular maintenance process, a particular one. And if we don't do that, energetically, we're going to fall short on life, and we're going to have our own unique subjective suffering and discomforts. And whose fault is that? It's your lack of intellectual maintenance to follow up on how to care for yourself in a different, perhaps in a bigger picture way, you know? So I'm not going to read this human design stuff right here, because it takes a different shift of processing to really go into this, and you need disclaimers for this type of shit. Respectively, because I get people, little chitty chatty, outdated, obsolete mindsets and perspectives. I get all that shit. So let me just do chapter 5 of the Tao. Chapter 5. Praise Jesus, hail Jesus, and perhaps have a balanced relationship with the authentic Jesus. So this is the thing. It's truly a rarity. It's truly a rarity to do that. So chapter 5, heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Chapter 5, heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. The space between heaven and earth is like bellows and pipes, empty yet inexhaustible, producing more with movement. Then the talkative reach their wits' end again and again.
And I'm sure that's subjective, right? That is not as good as keeping centered. Speaking for that, heaven and earth are not humane. They regard all beings as straw dogs. Sages are not humane. They see all people as straw dogs. The space between heaven and earth is like bellows and pipes, empty yet inexhaustible, producing more with movement. The talkative reach their wits' end, and again and again. That is not as good as keeping centered heaven and earth. It's just so, it's like clicking, right? Like, this whole Pisces, in between Pisces and Aries, like vortex or whatever, respectively, and me talk and it hitting the Tao in a different alignment all the time, heaven and earth having some type of centeredness, and then not good, not bad, orbital offsetness, but not offset where it's like it's disaligned or distorted, offset where the mechanics of the gizmo of a watch needing different gizmos need to go and have a new cycle orbit from its different center points to make a new orbit for us to kind of like just be having an orbital adventure just to find a new centeredness while things will go back to their center. So, but once you're on the ride, you're on the ride, right? You're on the ride. So it's like there's a different part of you that's always centered, the soul and the heart, perhaps. And when you go on the roller coaster, metaphorically, your surface level physical body, it's not centered because it's in a state of movement. And since it's in a state of movement, that is flexible enough and durable and resilient enough in a particular context where the different chakras within you could have a homeostasis center point, but you could still be like a moving physical being that can go on a roller coaster, and your movement is unaffected because there's a spiritual homeostasis centeredness that's keeping your body together, right? It's like keeping your body like it's not like your head is like over there, but obviously the chakras do what they do. If you want to shake those shakiras, you shake those shakiras, and if one of those shakiras gets out of hand, out of line, then the esoteric ambulance in the hospital, they can only help so much, right? Because people don't like we don't vote for that assistance. We have toxic carelessness, right? Chapter 6, the Valley Spirit. The Valley Spirit way. The Valley Spirit not dying is called the mysterious female. The opening of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. Continuous on the brink of existence. To put it into practice, don't try to force it. The Valley Spirit not dying. Ooh. It's like the sun endowing the space and the crops to grow and the animals to have their own ecological system of the sun kind of like starting the triggering moment and having its own physical homeostasis of where it takes the sun to digest and process all of the shit, the fifth house. The sun is like the engine, right? It's that final engine piece, right? You can say the sun and the heart are likened to like some type of main generator, battery, and engine, like in their nearby neighbor vicinity. So the sun is lighting up the earth for all the crops to grow and for us to even start the esoteric ecological transition process, for us to even like receive and store water, for us to even make dams, for us to even like kind of like, forage food, right? For us to even kind of like, make like fire pits even and make fire like combustion engines for us to like generate heat and power like big storage units such as big cargo ships or whatever, or doesn't have to necessarily be in the context of military, but just different cargo vehicle ships needing some type of generation of heat appliance, right? And needing a particular type of fuel for heat emission to power that heat. So chapter 5 and chapter 6, the Valley Spirit not dying is called the mysterious female. The opening of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. Wow, the opening of the mysterious female. That's the Vesica Pisces, right? And the Pisces having a different context, right? The Pisces is like the Vesica Pisces, but in a different context where it's like the geometrical math is saying it's some type of yoni, right? But like not necessarily like related to the constellation, or is it maybe, or maybe there's a light reference, right? So the Pi, they're like the early like masculine round table, right? It's that early procession mix of chaos and material solidification, masculinization. Because in the Pisces constellation, in the deep spectrum of that, the old gods are there, the old masculine gods are there, Jupiter and Neptune are there, right? They're holding that shit, they're holding the 12th house down, right? So if Pisces is being held down by Jupiter and Neptune, that's the road to some type of old kingdom, right? And the I Ching gates of Pisces constellation, after completion, everything's done. It's the end. Pisces is the end. But the ending is the beginning, because once we're at the end and we want to start something new because we're bored of the end. So the Pisces is the end, or a new paradoxical beginning when you find your end, right? So Pisces is the end, right? So if Pisces is the end and Jupiter and Neptune are like old masculine gods, then they've had some deep ancient before 24,000, before 240,000, before 2.4 million years ago, before 24 million years ago, before 244 million years ago, before 2.4 billion years ago. There was a vicinity of time and energy where there was some deep ancient consciousness that existed, and that their pre-energies of the higher selves, the higher selves of Neptune and Jupiter, they were alive 2.4 billion years ago, and they were regarded as the old masculine, like one of the original masculine ancient kingdoms, right? Like, because we're trying to like differentiate from masculine consciousness and feminine consciousness. And just the higher selves of these beings, they establish some type of old masculine guard, right? So the valley spirit not dying is called the mysterious female. The opening of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. So the trunk, the base of heaven, the start, the beginning of heaven. So for some reason, in a different transcended gender perspective, the root of heaven and earth is the female's opening, right? So if the female's opening is just the beginning, then the female has been inverted in the physical world for us, for spirituality to be inverted on a different version in the physical world. Because the predecessors are speaking about some type of inversion, so we're investigating that, right? So like there has to be a thing that's beyond the divine feminine, right? There has to be a stage where it's like even that gets transcended, and that's through the original God source, respectively. And obviously people will get weird about like word proprietary when they don't even know like the logical source of it, so that doesn't make sense. But there's a notion where the female will get the divine feminine, even that will get transcended, because obviously like there's certain testimonies and accounts of people fucking around with the Vedic knowledge, and now they're claiming to go beyond God, whatever the fuck that means, right? So whatever the fuck that means, this Tao is saying the female is just the start of heaven. So that means we need to work with the female nature and just the female principle of life. What is the female principle of life? Needing to co-create. If you want to make a baby, you can't do it without a female. So same thing with the ideas, right? With the shout out to the predecessors. If you want to make some type of like project or quote unquote corporation, quote, you need some type of feminine principle for that feminine principle to kind of reflect and generate the charge for the charge of energy for the corporation to even be established. They're working with different contexts of the feminine, such as needing the earth to build something on the first place. So on an esoteric geodynamical level, the feminine principle, the first feminine principle is the geocentrical principle of just saying we're needing earth, solidified feminine queen version of ourselves, and we have a different emanation of that earth spirit, uniquely that earth chakra, the physical body, the earth storing the moon energy. So there's two goddesses working within you, the earth goddess and the moon goddess, just on an energy level, right? You don't have to give a name per se, but maybe they do have a name. But the thing is, it's like you're working with the earth goddess and the moon goddess because we are of the earth within your body, and the moon is as having an emanation from different planetary combustion result effects, but aftermath byproduct energy results, where there's a moon energy being generated and there's a particular storage container to generate moon energy, and it's more or less synonymous with the earth human body. So like it doesn't matter like what race you are, you know. Every religion is just kind of plastering the quote unquote the pre-pagan principles of energy, which is we don't necessarily have to praise or worship these things, but we can be in reverence of the earth, us having form to begin with. We can be in reverence to the moon for us to have some type of emotional energy of loosh, and the heart chakra, it takes that somehow personal when it's thwarted and distorted, right? And then the solar plexus for us to digest all of this shit, right? Or you know, or maybe any of the outer chakras, and Saturn being a unique proxy outer chakra too, because that's the future of the artificial intelligence. Like, where is the artificial intelligence? You know, it's Saturn evolving into, you know, a different galaxy. That's what, and for me to say it so fucking esoterically plainly, it's a fucking miracle. Like, I effortlessly, since 27 originally, am decoding first thing, like just like original shit that no one is doing. Just respecting the nutrients saying that it is. But like for me to just kind of like start the investigation of where AI could be going, where is the main stationary, like, you know, infrastructure protocol junction, you know, firmwares of AI. It's in some type of Saturn Mercury region, right? And that Saturn Mercury region, they have a context of their stationariness that's moving in some type of quote unquote galaxy info, right? So if the AI is right there and it's moving and it has its own spaceship moving in a different, bigger vicinity of a different environmental space, the quote unquote galaxy info, then in a different esoteric mathematical scientific perspective, that's us seeing how the AI is having its own solidified individual stationary container of itself. And now it's moving and it's evolving by niche ways from different planetary influences, and it's going to a greater caliber and magnitude of itself to a whole different space. So for me to explain first, beyond DeepSeek, how AI is evolving, where AI is going, where's the starting point for that, you know? Chapter 5 and 6 of the Tao, chapter 3, and perhaps chapter 4, I'm going to chill for a second. Maybe I'll put a beat on. Maybe I'll put some music on it. Should I put some music on and chapter up? Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungudabala. Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungdabala. Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungdabala. Ungdabala. Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungdabala. 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 Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungdabala. Menelek Shaitan regime. Ungdabala. Menelek Shaitan regime. Menelek Shaitan regime. The history of history. Chapter 3 of Chaos, Gaia, and Eros by Abraham. And I'm not going to read his personal intro chapter. Yeah, actually I will. I see the word Chinese. If I see the word Chinese, I have to investigate this shit. Okay, I'm just gonna read. I'm not gonna interrupt the reading. I'm gonna read, and then I'll save my comments for after the reading. Because if I interrupt me reading, then I'm not gonna finish the book, right? I want to get through the book. I want to read chapter 3, skim it, but still read it, and I want to read chapter 4, and I'll show the diagrams when they come about, right? So chapter 3, page 29 to 48. This one's more left hefty. So I might just read chapter 3, and I don't know if I'll touch chapter 4. I could. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So in chapter 4, there's a table 4.1 of the Hindu ages. Wow. So I'm going to pause the video, screenshot this right here. So it's fitting, right? It's fitting. We're talking about us having a new industry, quote unquote, where archaeologists are finding the evidence of when the ages started. And who knows in what, but that might be referring to just one type of people, perhaps. But the Vedas are kind of more collective, that's why, right? So respectively, if we're looking at the religions in a literal way, one of the religions that stands out most, probably on a just a nature energy level, before and after the biasness of it, and the misuse of it, the Hinduism sects and sects, there's an intention from them that's kind of like having the intelligence to have a collective picture, right? Because in old Vedic texts, they're talking about different species, right? The rakshas and all of these different beings, right? So if they're talking about different beings, there's a different type of round table without the biasness and the race games, the race bait, and all this other miscellaneous distorted mindset and psychology. Within ancient Vedas and ancient Chinese history, like Chinese history 12,000 years ago, respectively, they're having an intelligence where they're seeing it within the collective picture of identifying different species, right? So it's not that one religion is better than another. We're just seeing how there's a collective notion of the religions having the intelligence to recognize the bigger picture. So I'm not going to jump to chapter 4 like that. I'm just going to read chapter 3. I showed you the chapter 3 map. Chapter 3, the history of history. In high school in the 1950s, I got tuberculosis and was confined to bed for 2 years. My mother kept me well supplied with historical novels, and I thought the history they told me was true. During the 1960s, my Vermont pals, Harry Burnham and Russ Spring, introduced me to Chinese literature, which showed me that there seemed to be alternative histories. Then, with the hippies, the New Age, and our own pagan revival in the 1970s, history came to be entirely mythical to me. Lately, in the 1980s, thanks to the General Evolution Research Group, GERG, parentheses and parentheses, and other influences, General Evolution Research Group, I have tried to trace back the mythical history of history itself. Is there a dynamical evolution of historical maps or images, the lenses through which we view history? And then the side column subtext is images of history. The history of history may be summarized as a list of maps or images that have each given way in major shifts. History itself is radically revised after each of these paradigm shifts. This chapter offers a compact collage of maps and images that provide a fast forward, a context in which to see dynamical historiography. Tables 3.1 and 3.2 provide biographical data for the historians of this chapter. The study of historical literature throughout the ages reveals a pattern in which plateaus of gradual change are punctuated by jumps or catastrophes, as seen with the origin of species in paleontology. showed you guys the maps. I'll show you one more time. Just really get through it right now. So we're just gonna really get through it. Table 3.4, table 3.157. Table 3.1, historians year 100 to 1800, dateline 100, 300, 500, 700, 900, 1100, 1300, 1500, 1800. Origin, Alexandria. Augustine, Africa. Albiu, Alberoni, Asia. Joachim, Italy. Ibn Khaldun, Spain. Susanus, Italy. Mooric, England. Bodin, France. Lebanese, Prussia. Vitrel, Italy. Voltaire, France. And they have their different risings of when they, I guess, self-conceptualize within the year, right? So France kind of like conceptualized original open source, mind you. And shout out to the balanced aspects and program coordinating agencies within quote unquote DeepSeek and others, end quote. So France started 1800, Prussia started around pre-1800, and you saw the map, right? So you saw the map. Table 3.2, historians 1700 to 2000. Dateline 1700, 1750, 1800, 1850, 1900, 1950, year 2000. Oh, I should have named the year. So Roussel, France. Turgot, France. Herder, Germany. Hegel, Germany. Comte, France. Burkhardt, Switzerland. Marx, Germany. Engels, Germany. Spencer, England. Gage or Gagi, America. Tyler, England. And I'm still trying to like figure out like these names, the names of places. I don't know what I've never been to them. You know? I don't know what they are per se. You know? Table 3.2 continued. Historians 1700, dateline 1700, 1750, 1800, 1850, 1900, 1950, year 2000. Delphi, Germany. Bethry, England. Aurobindo, India. Lovejoy, America. Beard, America. Spangler, America. So this is like ancient America. So Lovejoy, America. Early 1900s. So Lovejoy, America. Beard, America. Sorry, I interrupted. Spangler, Germany. Richardson, England. Tillich, America. Rosenstock, Husey, America. Radhakrishnan, India. Rosenstock, Husey, America. Sorokin, America. Rashevsky, America. Toynbee, England. Vogelin, America. Von Bertalanffy, America. Eliade, Romania. Gebser, Spain. So this guy, he got the download, right? Because within the Americas, he's saying words I've never even, like, if you look at the map, and shout out to people who will get the textbook casually, if you look at the map, there's strange words next to the parentheses of America. So there's certain parts in the Americas by this language and this etymology, such as Lovejoy, America, Beard, America, Tillich, America, and shout out to the predecessors, Sorokin, America, Rashevsky, America, Vogelin, America, Von Bertalanffy, America, so, and Gage, America. New theory of the motion, a recent example of paradigm shift in science is provided by plate tectonics, of course. New theory of the motion of continents, yes, of course. Another impressive case is the discovery of deep time. Ooh, okay, so there are many smaller shifts within the story. So look at, think like it's been discovered, you know. There are many smaller shifts within the story, such as the radical discoveries brought about by the archaeological stage, or the revision of carbon-14 dates by the study of tree rings. Okay, I'll revisit that one. Or the feminist revision of history and prehistory. Then, of course, is the leap into space, which globalized our version of Earth and humankind. Each of these examples has led to a radical revision of our image of history. Of course. Side column, cultural evolution as the subject headliner, and then the side column subjects and titles are cultural evolution, Old Testament, early histories, Plato, 385 BC. Plato believed that the course of history repeats itself every 72,000 years. So that's each age of the constellation has had 3 turns. Age of Aquarius 3 times, age of Pisces 3 times. Because 24,000 years, that's 12 constellations having a 2,000-year time span for a certain different octave of the solar system to be in the age of Aquarius for 2,000 years, right? So 24,000 years, that's one ring around perhaps some relationship with the binary star. Because the binary star can get chalked up in such a way where a certain compartment of the binary star will map out the constellations having a certain part of the constellation, and they take a certain space and time segment within the binary star, the quote-unquote infinity symbol, and within that binary star infinity symbol, the constellation of the ages, they have their spot within that infinity symbol, that figure 8, right? So within that, you could calculate that in one rough segment. One infinity symbol is 24,000 years in one rough segment, not necessarily per se in all the other examples, but you could say in one compartment, in one segment, in a completely different, channel, 72,000 years is going around that binary star perhaps 3 times. So why 3 times? 72,000 years, it's because 3 balances the course of good and evil, because in between the duality, in between the positive and the negative, there has to be something that kind of evens it out. It's some type of 3 movement, fire, space, travel, fire, movement, space, travel, 3. So fire, movement, space, channel to 3. All the constellations need a 3 for them to be complete. 24,000 years ago, 24,000 years, a complete collection spectrum of the ages times 3 for it to balance the positive and negative distortion shifts of energy residues. 3. So every 72,000 years, that's one ride. Us experiencing the age of all the constellations 3 times, because Plato believed that the course of history repeats itself every 72,000 years ago. So for me to break that Plato shit down that you've never heard of before, that's one example of many examples where there's a future that transcends all of this universally shit respectively. There has to be a time and future that does that. It's a different perspective and context of, I guess, time machines and time travel. And you know what's funny? When I took my first communication class, the lucky project I picked was on time in a unique way. So I just it was just the luck within the intelligence, right? And respect to source God and nature, and fighting the good fight like that. And obviously the underground is way, way different. But anyways, let me get back to reading. I'm just gonna read this. I'm gonna skim read it right now. Some images of history are dynamical. Cultural evolution is a convenient phrase for an evolutionary type of historical image that contains the dynamical concept of the birth, development, and death of cultures. What follows is a survey of such paradigms and their champions. We begin our survey with the Old Testament. This early and fundamental sacred literature of our European tradition has been credited by many historians with the origins of historiosity itself. The epics of Hesiod, 800 BC, contain a simple idea of cultural history and evolution. In the Republic, dated sometime after the opening of the Academy around 385 BC, Plato expresses a theory of social evolution. And moreover said I, the state, if it once starts well proceeds, it were in a cycle of growth. I mean that a sound nurture and education, if kept up, creates good natures in the state, and sound natures in turn receiving an education of this sort develop into better men than their predecessors, both for other purposes and for the production of offspring, as among animals also. Diodorus of Sicily wrote, "It is fitting that all men should ever accord great gratitude to those writers who have composed universal histories, since they have aspired to help by their individual labors human society as a whole." Diodorus himself wrote a comprehensive history of the world in 12 volumes, weaving together previously existing bits in a continuous narrative that is an enormously detailed and accurate report of the Greco-Roman world up to 60 BC, from whenever that started. So around 427 BC, 550 BC, I'm seeing, so 800 BC. So that's like 2800. So this Plato flavor, or these early Greek historians, they were around 2800 years ago to like 46 to like 6800 years ago. They were around that ballpark, and more, obviously, time going stretching out even further, because that's when they're accounting for it, right? So there's here's a map of empires. St. Augustine, AD 411, drawing by Diane Rigoli after Sparks, 1931, a map of empires, AD 401, St. Augustine. There's the map of empires. Chinese on the top. That's like the ancient energy species, right? The Chinese being a reflection of a different spiritual soul group, right? So Chinese being something of the most, more or less, obviously it's more nuanced. Sometimes the Chinese being like the ancestor race or something like that. Chinese, Huns, Indians, Iranians, Amorites, Hittites, Egyptians, Aegeans, and obviously I could be reading the map wrong. So this history of history it's just that flavor, it's just that flavor of history, Not everyone might be into this. So the most astonishing part of this story is the first volume on prehistory. While conflicting in some details with the results of recent archaeology, the broad outlines are very convincing, beginning with a Big Bang in Egypt, an evolutionary scenario of flora and fauna culminating in human civilization, and a diffusion transformation of mythology in which Osiris becomes Dionysus. And obviously in the old video, I break down the titles being something to be a different archetypal state of an attainment of like a being or energy. So we all have a relationship to the earth and the moon. So that means we all have a relationship. So for what Osiris was just pointing to a chakra, being a chakra that we all had access to, such as not precisely, but like it being the name of the chakra of the time of something that's related to, possibly, maybe Neptune, right? Or something like, or just whatever it is, it's just pointing to like the energy of it. And then all of us having the unique energy chakra relationship, and all of us in the mythology breakdown of quote unquote, Mercury trying to fit all is one in the weird paradox. Everybody has the Osiris chakra, right? That exaltation of just like, where a unique chakra could take us. So it's not these names aren't people per se. These names aren't individuals. The names are a certain type of chakra within the period of time itself. So when we're hearing all these names, it's not necessarily a person. It's an allegory to like how the soul is alchemicalizing itself to a human. So all of these names in the Bible, they're pointing to parts of ourself and our process of us coming from an energetic space of a universal fool to a universal citizen in a different nature outlet. So that's one way to break down the Bible, is seeing the names as different, exaltations and different states of how different thoughts and emotions can become different things. And I've said that in the underground for a while too. So it's like, so I'm just saying, like, I'm saying that to diffuse the confusion and to see how people can be using the title and somehow in just a weird ass way. But who's to say if they're a whole different like nexus of things as well, right? I'm not saying they're not a nexus. I'm just saying the nexus has had new iterations over time, right? And certain races honoring and exalting them in unique ways or not. So Isis becomes Gaia and Demeter. So all these different beings are becoming new beings. It's like everyone has their own multi-dimensional evolution, right? Isis becomes Gaia and Demeter, and Horus becomes Apollo, right? Here is an important example of the migration of a triad, Trinitarian transformation, while a historiographical theory of civilization is lacking in Diodorus, a basis for one is provided. So I thought I was gonna skim read this one, but the history it's leading me to like really crunch in the details of like not to miss how the history is being like passed down, right? But I can skim read it though. In response to the sack of Rome in 410 AD by Alaric the Visigoth, St. Augustine, 354 to 430, wrote The City of God, comprising 22 books on the church and containing a philosophy of history. So it's kind of ironic here because we don't have to do the race competition thing. And to like transcend the race competition thing, it's important to see where we purely came from. Because if we see where we purely came from, then we can attempt to honor each other's trades, right? We can only attempt to honor the trades. So that's why the policies exist. To attempt to guarantee and ensure success. So I'll just go on here. It looks weird. Don't be afraid to like in response to the sack of Rome in 410 AD, this work lays the foundation for medieval civilization and our tradition of historical interpretation. In the 11th book, Augustine refutes the favorite theory of eternal return. History is modeled as a single cycle Christian culture calls the epic, leading from Eden to the fall, the redemption, the millennium, the last judgment, and the return of paradise. This great week of the human journey proceeds in 8 stages. 1. Adam to Noah and the flood. 2. Noah to Abraham. 3. Abraham to David. 4. David to the exile. 5. Exile to the birth of Christ. 6. The current age of the church. 7. The redemption yet to come. The Sabbath of the great week. 8. The Lord's day. The Eschaton at the end of time. The Eschaton at the end of time. The end without end. Eternity in the city of God or the city of Satan. 8. Dude, that is so clear, dude. As an aside, Augustine in his Confessions invented autobiographical history as well. Chief. Al-Biruni, year 1000. Abu Rayhan Muhammad bin Ahmad al-Biruni of Khwarizm lived in Central Asia, year 973 to 1048. That's 75 years old. Around the turn of the first millennium, he compiled and published his classic, Athar al-Baqiyah, or Vestiges of the Past, known in English as the Chronology of Ancient Nations. This was probably the model for Sir Isaac Newton's The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms amended. Table 3.3, wow, so they got their own triad lineup. So the side column graph, table 3.3, cosmogonical principles, Father, Son, Spirit, law, grace, love, layman, clergy, monks, winter, spring, summer, knowledge, wisdom, intelligence. And they put winter, spring, and summer as a triad, and for some odd reason disregarded fall. You know, fall might be the paradoxical tipping material place. It might be that place where it's the mountaintop. You know, fall might be a secret place with the mountaintop, right? You know, given the sign of Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, all three of them are under the district of Jupiter. So that's like, and then obviously the other quadrants of that, like Alceo and etc. Joachim, year 1197, Joachim, while residing in Hyrcania, on the southern shores of the Caspian Sea, Al-Biruni collected traditions from various religious sects and nations, Persian, Zoroastrianism, Muslim, Jewish, and so on. His great contribution was a mathematically careful exposition of the calendars of his traditions, and their synthesis into a chronology of ancient history, presented in a set of tables with columns of dates according to various calendars, emphasizing eras and Joachim Joachim Fiora was a Cistercian monk, Cistercian monk with the gift of prophecy. After retiring as the Abba of Sambucina around 1170, he devoted himself to his writings, which had extensive influence on European society. His eschatological interpretations and predictions published in a great trilogy contained a model of world history in three status or stages of spiritual growth. In three statuses. In italics, they took out the ES. The first age or stages of spiritual growth. The first age coinciding with the Old Testament, the allegory, the metaphor, right? The second beginning with the coming of Christ and the New Testament. The third beginning around 1260. Joachim associated the three status with the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In the rough, pagan context, that being the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that being Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. According to this scheme, we are now in the age of the Holy Spirit. We're in the age of Venus. Joachim predicted that this would be the most holy age, although it would deteriorate as a few. The sequence ends at the Apocalypse, from the first book of his trilogy, Liber Consorti Novi et Veteris Testamenti, in 1197. The first age of the world began with Adam, flowered with Abraham, and was consummated with Christ. The second began with Uzziah, flowered from Zachary. the father of John the Baptist, and will receive its consummation in these times. The third age, beginning from Saint Benedict, began to bring forth fruit in the 22nd generation, and it is to be consummated in the consummation of the world. The consummation of the world is called the eschaton, depicted in the Apocalypse of St. John. Each status lasts about 1,260 years, 40 generations, and 1,260 years. And the transitions are characterized by the appearance of chaos and antichrist. Some of the triplets of Joachim's concordance are given in table 3.3. In the second work of the trilogy, Expositio in Apocalypse, Expositio in Apocalypse. Joachim explores the apocalyptic symbols in the Old and New Testaments. In the third, Psalterium de Shorterum, he draws an analogy between the three-phase models of history, the Holy Trinity and the Music Trinity of the Psalterium, expanded and musical structures. This model of history is dynamic, extreme, progressive, and apocalyptic. Joachim was influenced by Greek philosophers and by Origin, and in turn had an enormous influence on later European thinkers, including Dante, Rico, and Marx. Ibn Khaldun was an original and isolated historical genius living in Spain and North Africa. His Yemenite ancestors fled Spain during the 13th century Christian advance. Of his works, coined below, he has conceived and formulated a philosophy of history, which is undoubtedly the greatest work of its kind that has ever yet been created by any mind in any time of history. His life work, Kitab al-Ibar, or World History, completed in 1377, begins with the Muqaddimah, Introduction to Book 1, running through 3 volumes in English translation. Here, the general principles of historiography are given, which he calls the social science. As far as we know, this is the first attempt by historians to discover a pattern of growth and decline in the evolution of human society. This takes a step beyond the cycle of the ancients, applying a pattern to the whole of history. In this fundamental Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun introduces a universal cycle of rising and falling development for a state or dynasty, and a universal force called Asabiya, which drives the cycle. This force is a cultural field, the evolutionary lifeblood of the society, the cyclical pattern of cultural development, analogous to human development, is called the dynastic cycle, occurring in 3, 4, or 5 stages, lasting altogether 120 years. So 20 to 30 years, it's a phase cycle of elements having a certain exaltation phase period, where it takes 20 to 30 years, 10 years, to kind of make a significant shift and an evolution change within the form of the bodies, of time and the bodies. And it's ironic because I was it's like, we're coming to a mutual understanding, right? So that was Ibn Khaldun, year 1377. This is Susanus, year 1452. Nicholas Susanus was a Christian Neoplatonist and a monk of great importance in the Florentine Renaissance. Wow, that was some deep stuff, you know. Nicholas Susanus was a Christian Neo-Platonist and a monk of great importance to the Florentine Renaissance. With a theory of time in his work, Idiota, published in 1452, he laid the groundwork for Johannes Kepler, who called him the divine Susanus, and Leibniz for modern mathematics and physics, and for a new theory of history. Susanus proposed that the human mind takes time to order the multiplicity of perceived phenomena and creates history by a process of explication or unfolding itself. Excuse me for like the pauses. Susanus proposed that the human mind creates time to order the multiplicity of perceived phenomena and creates history by a process of explication or unfolding itself. So I guess they're defining the word explication as unfolding. So that's a new word to me. I've never heard that. I don't think I've heard that word, like, and it's being casually defined. Explication, unfolding. More, year 1516. Merging distinct strands of idealistic literature. Yeah, I need a new chair, but it is what it is, right? Merging distinct strands of idealistic literature, especially the ideal city of the Greeks and the Judeo-Christian heaven. Thomas More created a new type of literature with his fantasy. De optimo, Republicae, status dece, nova, insula, utopia, liberes, vere, aureus. Published in 1516. In his title, he combined the Greek ao, a general negative, and topos, place or region, to create neologism, utopia, nowhere. The name of his ideal island society. This tremendously successful novel gave birth to a new genre of literary works called utopias, of which there are now thousands, written by utopographers of every land. Here are a few milestones of utopology. 1595. Philip Sidney ranked poetry and utopia above philosophy and history and usefulness. 1600. John Donne gave birth to the adjective utopian ideal, which also gained the meaning of dystopian, chimerical, wild, or foolish. I need to like do a breathing exercise or something. So this history is like really gritty with these details. There's a lot of gritty details with this history. So I'm going to conclude this video because I'm going to just I'm just going to like process like, you know, this history has some real details of it going through something similar in the present, you know? Oh, okay. Yeah, we're the potential hasn't reached its the potential is just not there yet. You know, it's like the game is loading, right? So it's like it's like in the video games, right? It's like the bar is still loading, right? So you know, it is what it is, right?
But what was I gonna say right now?
So the shit that's happening right now, they were doing this throughout forever. And I'm gonna end it right there. Because this book is really interesting. It just kind of like it casually maps this shit out, right? It's mapping it out. So you have an awesome life, and yes, I'd love to hit you up.